U.S. President Joe Biden says he's worried that the disarray in Congress could undermine his pledge to provide Ukraine with what it needs for its fight against Russia's invasion. His comments coming a day after the House Speaker was removed from his role by hardliners within his own party. It is the first time in history that the chamber has ousted its leader.
Chaos reigns on Capitol Hill. The historic ousting of Speaker Kevin McCarthy has left a question mark over the United States' ability to keep funding Ukraine's war effort. His 11th hour deal to stop a government shutdown came at a high price.
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
President Biden said it was necessary to change the poisonous atmosphere in Washington. He tried to assuage fears over future funding for Kyiv.
Does the disarray on Capitol Hill after your conversation with allies yesterday worry you that you won't be able to deliver the aid that the U.S. has promised to Ukraine?
It does worry me, but I know there are a majority of members of the House and Senate in both parties who have said that they support funding Ukraine. We can support Ukraine in the next tranche that we need, and there is another means by which we may be able to find funding for that, but I'm not going to get into that now.
The president said he would make a major speech on the issue soon, but gave no further details. McCarthy's deputy, Steve Scalise, was first to throw his hat into the ring for the Speaker position. He faces a challenge from Conservative favourite Jim Jordan. Others are expected to join the race too, such as Oklahoma's Kevin Hern. Many in Washington doubt that any candidate can get the votes needed to become Speaker. It took 15 rounds of voting for McCarthy to take up the post in January, and this race could be even more complicated.
DW's Washington Bureau Chief Enas Pole has been monitoring events at Capitol Hill, and she sent us this assessment of the turmoil within the House of Representatives.
What we are experiencing right now is the beginning of a new era in U.S. politics, which very likely will be dominated by chaos and disruption, as a small group of radical Republicans are not only holding the whole country hostage, but also the Republican Party. It is very hard to say at this moment how the GOP will ever get out of the situation they brought upon themselves by granting so much power to Donald Trump and his MAGA movement, which neither respects institutions nor democratic processes. Whoever the next Speaker of the House will be, he or she is facing the same problems as the former Speaker did. The Republicans have a razor-thin majority and a few people can boycott an election. It might come down to the question if the Democrats will be willing to elect a Speaker of the House with whom they think they can work with to get a budget done. And in the center of this will be the question if the budget will include another round of aid to Ukraine when more and more Americans are more skeptical about spending so much money for a country which is so far away. This infight is bad for both parties, as many Americans who are already so tired of the Washington games turn their backs on politics. And that is dangerous for every democracy, and especially dangerous for this country, with the next elections just being a little bit more than a year away.
All right, I want to pull in now Rachel Rizzo. She is a senior fellow for the Atlantic Council in Washington. Rachel, it's good to see you again. I mean, yeah, some heady events in the last 24 hours. The first time in U.S. history that a House Speaker was removed by his own party. How would you explain this to those of us who are watching from outside?
Well, it's hard enough to try to explain this to those of us who are watching it from the inside, but I think what is important to note is that this is absolutely uncharted territory. So where we are and what happens next is really tough to say. I think the message to really take away from all of this is, if you're watching from the outside, is that the Republican Party is really in chaos right now. We had hints of this earlier this year when it took 15 rounds for Speaker McCarthy, or former Speaker McCarthy, we should say, to finally win his speakership after giving concession after concession to the far right group in the Republican Party. And we've seen the results of that time and time again, a small but very loud and boisterous group of far-right populists that have been able to hold the Republican Party and really Congress hostage. We could have seen this coming. This is what happens when you cater to and shape your policies and rhetoric around someone like Donald Trump. So the consequences of that reverberate far longer than just a four-year presidency.
I mean, I want to say that Kevin McCarthy is now something like political roadkill, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to ask you, I mean, what does he represent tonight?
Well, it really depends on who you're talking to. If you're a Democrat, Kevin McCarthy is someone who has contributed not only to the rise, but the staying power of Donald Trump and the populist right that he represents. McCarthy was one of the 147 House Republicans who voted to reject Biden's election victory in January of 2021. And then the House Minority Leader, he privately criticized Trump in the wake of the January 6th insurrection, but backed off from calling for his resignation because of fears from the Republican Party. But if you're also a far-right member of Congress, McCarthy represents someone who isn't far enough to the right, who sides with the Democrats in order to avoid a scenario where the government, say, defaults on its debt, or sides with the Dems to avoid a government shutdown. So he doesn't have many friends in Congress, and he hasn't had many friends for quite some time.
And what about Matt Gaetz? What does he represent tonight?
Well, I think Matt Gaetz and those that are of his ilk could represent the future of the Republican Party if they don't get their house in order. I'm thinking of people who walk alongside Matt Gaetz, like Lauren Boebert from Colorado, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have emerged in the years since Donald Trump's victory. They represent this sort of new type of conservatism, a populist, nationalist, anti-elite strain of conservatism that really wants to buck the status quo and push out the old guard. And as we've seen, they're really good at tying things like international decisions, foreign policy, to issues related to domestic politics. They're really, really good at that. And so let's see where this goes. But it's not really looking great at the moment for the Republican Party on Capitol Hill.
The Democrats, we know they could have rescued McCarthy. They didn't. Why not reach across the political aisle in an extreme situation like the one we saw last night?
Well, I don't think the Democrats felt any reason to rescue Kevin McCarthy. I think it's important to remember that Kevin McCarthy has made life extremely difficult for the Democrats for years. Just listen to some of the words that current House Democrats have said about Kevin McCarthy. Abigail Spanberger from Virginia said that he was the most unprincipled person to ever hold the speakership, that he's disdainful, that he lies about the process of governance. And Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries explained that McCarthy had brought this on himself by catering to extremists in his party, pointing to the 15 rounds of votes that it took last January. One of the concessions he made to the far-right Republicans was agreeing to allow any one member to force a motion to vacate. At the same time, Jeffries and McCarthy spoke over the weekend, and he made it clear that if the Democrats did vote for him, he wouldn't give them anything. So they really felt no reason to help him in this situation.
Amazing. The U.S. House Speaker, we want to remind our viewers, does not have to be a member of Congress. And so Donald Trump, former U.S. President Donald Trump, his name has been mentioned in this conversation. And here is what he had to say about this very idea. Take a listen.
A lot of people have been calling me about Speaker. All I can say is we'll do whatever is best for the country and for the Republican Party. We'll see. Have some great people. I just want to say we have some great people.
Would you take the job?
A lot of people have asked me about it. I'm focused. You know, we're leading. I don't know you. I'm sure you don't read too much in the papers, but we're leading by like 50 points for president. You know, my focus is totally on that. If I can help them during the process, I would do it. But we have some great people in the Republican Party that could do a great job as Speaker.
So what do you make of this, Rachel? Any validity to a possible Speaker Trump?
Well, I think what's important to note, first of all, is that the Speaker of the House is third in line to the U.S. presidency. So just putting that out there. But no, I really don't think that there's any real likelihood of Donald Trump becoming the next Speaker of the House, even though Troy Nehls, a House Republican from Texas, has nominated Trump to be Speaker. There's a couple reasons for this. First, he's the GOP frontrunner in the upcoming U.S. presidential election. So there's really no reason for him to focus his attention on being Speaker instead. This is a time-consuming job. It's not fun. Trump wouldn't like it. So there's really no reason for him to focus on this instead. A second sort of more practical reason is that there's a rule in the House Republican Conference of the current 118th Congress that clearly states that a member of the Republican leadership has to step aside if he's indicted for a felony for which the sentence is 2 or more years of imprisonment. Donald Trump currently has 91 criminal charges against him. So do with that information what you will. I don't think it's likely.
Okay, Rachel Rizzo with the Atlantic Council joining us tonight from Washington. Rachel, good to see you. Always excellent analysis. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent.
Clearly somebody's been lied to, because we heard the president come out and say there was a deal with the speaker on Ukraine, and the speaker just stood up in front of all of us and said that there's no deal on Ukraine. The House Democrats say there's a deal on Ukraine, so we're going to have to sort that out. We're going to have to sort out who's lying, because somebody's lying about whether or not, as in this CR negotiation, there was a secret side deal on Ukraine funding. We'll see.
Well, that was U.S. Congressman Matt Gaetz answering the question about future U.S. aid for Ukraine. Since the start of Russia's invasion, the U.S. has given Ukraine $45 billion in weapons and military equipment, and add to that the tens of billions to help finance Ukraine's government. The total in U.S. aid to Ukraine comes in now at about $100 billion U.S. dollars. Well, I'm joined now by Alexander Shera. He is the former Ukrainian ambassador to Austria. He is currently in Kyiv. He has been on the show with us numerous times. Ambassador, it's good to have you back with us. Considering what has happened in the last 4 or 5 days in the U.S., particularly the last 24 hours, who do you trust in the U.S. as a reliable ally right now?
You know, I, for the first time, was in America in 1991. I was a student visiting New Hampshire countryside, and I fell in love with that country right away, because those were the most warm, compassionate, humble, wonderful people I had ever seen. And now I look at this debate about Ukraine, at these people who passionately, with all their heart, are saying, give no money to Ukraine, leave Ukraine up to Putin. And I don't recognize the country at parts with which I once fell in love. I ask myself, don't these people understand that when they say deal on Ukraine, they mean deal on Ukraine being crucified? These people calling themselves Christians basically mean for Ukraine to be left crucified by Russia. And for what? For just wanting to be free, because this is the first war in a while that is not about something like terrorism or oil or something else, geopolitics. It's about one country being choosing freedom and the other one punishing it for it, killing it, raping, looting, conducting genocide.
Let me ask you.
So, quite frankly, it's incredible for me to see this.
Let me ask you, Mr. Shera, what do you say to those Republicans who say that they're not against aid or helping Ukraine per se, but they are against delivering aid and not being able to control where it goes, how the money is being used? It sounds like U.S. lawmakers, it sounds like a lot of them have a trust issue with your country, Ukraine.
Well, it's very strange, because America has appointed a special envoy whose sole task is to control how the money is spent. Ukraine has opened everything to American, auditors. There is not a single case of Ukraine spending these weapons that we are being provided. And first of all, it's about weapons somehow suspiciously. The same goes for the money provided. So it's just very, very bewildering for me.
Last week on this program, we reported on the arrival of U.S. Abrams tanks in Ukraine. This week, we've got the U.S. government avoiding a shutdown with a plan that includes no aid for Ukraine. I mean, this seems to be what the Kremlin reportedly wants to see happen more, a narrative of dwindling unity between Washington and Kyiv. Do you see that narrative being developed?
I see Russia desperately hoping for this narrative to be developed and using it and using every single, soundbite American Congress provides for this narrative. That's for sure. But other than that, we are immensely thankful for the United States for, giving us javelins, HIMARS, Abrams now. Because if it wasn't for that, then I would be dead. Millions of people here in Kyiv downtown would be dead. This whole town, 3 million people, would be like Aleppo now. This is the reality. We are immensely thankful for that.
Are you, Mr. Ambassador, let me ask you, are you satisfied with what President Zelensky and his administration are doing to nurture and to keep relations with the U.S. healthy? I mean, if you had President Zelensky's ear right now, what would you advise that he do first thing tomorrow?
You ask a tricky question, someone who is in employ of Ukrainian government, I must say. Definitely we are doing our best, and I think if someone believes that we are somehow misappropriating something that has been providing for us, this someone just believes what he or she wants to believe, just to justify their desire, to leave Ukraine, to be crucified by the beast in Moscow. And quite frankly, I think we are doing whatever we can. We have an amazing ambassador in Washington. She is doing a great job. And I think, I hope Americans will see, we'll see what we are doing.
I want to ask you, before we run out of time, about the actual war itself, what we're seeing on the battlefield. New statistics I read today, artillery rounds that are being fired in this war, Russian forces have a 10-to-1 advantage over Ukrainian forces. That's a huge difference, a huge advantage that the Russians have. What happens then if U.S. weapons shipments to Ukraine stop or are reduced?
Our foreign minister likes to quote Golda Meir on that question. She once said when things weren't going very well for Israel, she once said, if we don't have the weapons, we'll fight with spades. And this is the mood in the country. I don't know a single person who privately or publicly somehow says, you know what, let's feed this guy in the Kremlin some more of our people and our land. Maybe he'll leave us alone. We don't have this illusion. This has to be decided now, and this has to be decided in favor of the country that shows freedom instead of slavery.
Ambassador Shera, as always, we appreciate getting your insights and you taking the time to talk with us. Thank you.
Thank you.